Hey everyone. I just got off a call with a founder, and to be very honest, I think we left in a situation that was a bit frustrating for both of us. They asked me to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, and since that's something that we don't do, we couldn't really talk much about their actual startup idea. Now, normally when startups ask us to sign an NDA via email before we get on a call, for the most part, I try to explain why we don't do that, but to be honest, it's often a very dark red flag because it just shows that founders are very inexperienced. But I do understand that there's not a lot of educational material out there that covers this question, so I wanted to give you a bit of insights in this video as to why startup investors typically do not sign NDAs. Maybe to preface this, I do understand that there are areas where investors might sign an NDA, typically later stage when there's a lot of financials, a lot of numbers. If there's a situation where an investor might have a conflict of interest because they're invested in another startup in a similar space already. Also, when it comes to selling the company later on and potentially a strategic buyer buying the company or some of the assets, I totally understand why an NDA is needed. And last but not least, what I'm saying mostly applies to software and hardware startups. I can't say a lot to how things are in regards to a life science or biomed or any other startup that is in an area that I just truly do not know a lot about. I can see how if there's patents involved and stuff like that, that NDAs do have value, but they do not have value when it comes to early stage technology software investments. Okay, so here's why we as early stage technology investors do not sign NDAs. Well, for one, we couldn't really do our job. Our job is to see a lot of ideas and a lot of teams early on and only invest in a very, very small fraction. If we were to sign an NDA with every single startup that we just meet and that pitches to us, very soon we could not speak to the next 5, 10 or 15 teams that work on an idea in the same space, even if we haven't invested in that first company that we signed an NDA for. So by asking us to sign an NDA, you basically make our job impossible because you're keeping us from talking to other startups in the same space. And second, you don't have anything that can be protected with an NDA. Typically at that point when you approach us at pre-seed or seed, all you're gonna have is an idea, maybe some early prototypes and a team. Now, the team and your prototype, no one can take that from you. If you're building a sound culture, if you are creating a great foundation for your team, no one's going to be able to take that from you. Same with the prototype. That's what you're building. No one else would just copy that. As for the idea, what we see is that a lot of inexperienced founders think that the idea makes up a lot of value. It doesn't. The idea is worthless. There's been hundreds of ride-sharing apps and similar models to Airbnb before Airbnb and Uber, and none of these ideas have succeeded because it's all about the execution. It's all about your team, and you're responsible for keeping that team together. And then number 3, and maybe this is more of a personal idea, but there's already enough documents involved in making an investment and getting an investment. We don't need more legal documents to make our lives harder. Let's focus on bringing value to your idea and your team instead of involving more and more lawyers. Now, we will never sign an NDA if you approach us, no matter how persistent you are. In fact, the more persistent you are, the more you're gonna drive us away. Typically, if we can sense that you're not gonna move, we're just gonna be hands off and we'll tell you to come back whenever you've changed your mind. But of course, you can also do some things to protect yourselves without an NDA if you feel that an investor might not have the best intentions in mind. For example, if you see that an investor that you're approaching is already invested in a company that's in a very similar space to what you're doing, and this other portfolio company could one day become a competitor, well, it's very easy. Just only share the information that you are comfortable sharing. Keep it a bit more high level while you build the relationship, and only if there's very strong interest, move forward and share more. Chances are, if they are a sound and very good investor, they will not make a second investment into the exact same business model. And so chances are you're gonna have a friendly interaction with them, but they will most probably decline pretty early on in the process, given that they would have a conflict of interest otherwise. So to summarize this, if you're only taking one thing away from this video, do not send NDAs to investors in your early fundraisers. We will not sign NDAs, and it's a bit of an orange flag, and it might even be a red flag depending on your background. If we think you should know that this is just not something you can do, we will most probably not even reply. There's a few reasons why we act the way we do. Number one, you're kind of making it hard for us to do our job if you try and protect everything that we see under an NDA. Number two, there's not much to protect anyway. Usually there's a very early prototype and idea in the team, and you have much better ways to protect your team rather than writing legal documents. And that brings me to the third point. Let's not create more legal documentation early on. Focus on execution and not on making things complicated from the start. Of course, you want to protect yourself in certain cases, especially if you're speaking with investors that have or might have investments in a space very similar to where you're operating. And the best advice I can give you for that scenario is to just share high-level information first, build a relationship, and see if there is some actual strong interest, and then decide on a case-by-case basis how much information you want to share. As I said at the beginning, there might be exceptions to the rule. For example, if you're operating in another space where there's a lot of patents and it truly is something that needs to be protected, maybe NDAs are appropriate, as well as for later stage investments when there's lots of financial data that gets shared, if there's lots of confidential information that you wouldn't want a competitor to have insights into. So with that, hopefully this gives a bit of clarity and it will help you avoid frustrating moments when you get on a call with your investor for the first time. Do not make this rookie mistake. Do not ask for NDAs. And with that, have a beautiful day. Stay curious, and I'll talk to you soon. Hey, if you like this video and you would like to do me a huge favor, then please smash that like button and subscribe. That's great for the YouTube algorithm and more people will see it. It will also make sure you will get to see all the upcoming videos on essentialism and entrepreneurship. And if there's a question or topic you would like me to cover, please let me know in the comments.